Thank you. Yes, welcome to this presentation on social emotional learning and culturally responsive teaching practices for the adult education classroom. This topic is timely because COVID-19 research has showed us that immigrant and minority populations have been disproportionately affected both in health and economics by COVID. This has brought the conversation of adult learner mental health into the realm of adult education. And because of this impact, considering our learners' mental health is more important than ever. And while I'm not going to present any specific COVID-19 research here, I have provided a reference document for this topic in the resources folder that accompanies this presentation. This topic is also timeless for adult education because research also shows that these frameworks support the social emotional well-being of learners, which has a direct impact on learning outcomes and supports the goals of adult education instruction, such as standards-based instruction, college and career readiness skills, and self-advocacy and independent learning skills. For these reasons and many more today, we will look at activities that can be used in the adult education classroom to integrate these frameworks into our instruction. These activities can be very beneficial not only for our learners' learning process and experiences, but also for their own personal growth. So my name is Hali Massey, and I am the ESOL specialist at the Virginia Adult Learning Resource Center. Our organization provides professional development and technical assistance for adult education programs in the state of Virginia. Part of our scope of work includes working with adult education instructors to really understand what resources, training, and information that they need in order to meet their learners' needs, as well as meet state and federal adult education expectations. Because of my area of work is in ESOL instruction, a lot of the examples that I'm going to share today are coming from the English language learning perspective. However, all of the activities that we're going to look at today are very applicable to all adult education classrooms, but many may require some modifications depending on your specific teaching context. And as we go through, if you think of any of those modifications or adaptations that you might want to do for these activities, please feel free to put that in the chat. We are going to have kind of a short chat discussion about that at the end of the presentation as well. So to get started, I wanted to do a little bit of an icebreaker. And there are going to be several places during this presentation where I will ask you to participate in some of these social emotional learning and culturally responsive activities. I really want you to be able to see these activities from the learner perspective. And the goal is that you'll be able to reflect on these activities and how they can benefit the learning process. And again, what you might need to do to make these activities work for your learners. So to get started today, we're using this emotional check-in activity. So we're going to talk about these in more depth later in the presentation, but it's just a fun, productive way to get started. So for this activity, please choose the sheep image that best represents how you're feeling today about your adult education work. If you would like to, please include why you are selecting that image. It's not necessary to give an explanation, but it does help to expand on this activity to get to know a little bit more about each other. I see lots of responses already coming in, lots of threes. Hopefully by the end of the presentation, some of that will be brushed away and you'll be able to see straight. I see a 5, a 7, a little tired, but encouraged. Good, good. Yeah, if I was doing this, I would probably choose number 9 because I feel like he looks like he's jumping into something really exciting, and hopefully this presentation is going to be fun and engaging and exciting. Great, so thank you all so much for sharing. Thank you if you provided an explanation as well. It is interesting to see how people kind of perceive these images and how they represent their feelings differently. So if you are feeling like a little tired, you put 3 or 4 in the chat for the images before, we're going to do a mindfulness activity, and hopefully that will help get you focused and excited for this session. And so Basically, the purpose of this activity is to focus and ready your mind for a learning experience. It helps to create space for you to process what's happening right now while leaving some of life's other distractions on the back burner. So to get started with this activity, I would suggest, if you were able to close your eyes. If you're not able to close your eyes, you can just focus on a single focal point in the space where you are. This helps with just eliminating distractions. And I'm actually going to stop my video so that my image isn't distracting to you while we do this as well. So for this activity, there are 3 steps. For each step, we will take about 30 seconds to focus. For step 1, you're going to focus on one thing that you smell in the space where you are. So here we're just focusing on the sense of smell. You can think about what the smell is, where it's coming from, just wanting to keep your focus on that for 30 seconds. Okay, now we're going to move to the second step. For this step, we want to focus on a single sound that we can hear in our space. Similar to the first step, you want to completely focus your thoughts on this one sound. And for the final thoughts, we will open our eyes if they were closed and now focus on one thing we can see. It is best to choose something that perhaps you haven't noticed before in your space or that you have not focused on before. Again, direct your thoughts to just this one thing that you are looking at. Okay, we can go ahead and come back, and I'm going to go ahead and turn my video back on so you can see me. I hope you enjoyed that little mental break and were able to focus your mind. I would like to take a minute here to kind of reflect on this activity, and you can just add your responses to these questions in the chat box. So the first question is, how do you feel after this activity? So just reflecting on your own feelings after completing that. How are you feeling? Calm, refreshed, calm. Calm, good, that's the purpose, yay. Lots of calms there, that's really good to see. Perfect. I do like to do this activity where I also play some like relaxing music in the background. It's a little bit much when you're like juggling Zoom and sharing and all of that. And I didn't want to mess it up on this platform. But it's a good add there to play that kind of relaxing music. And the second question is, how do you think your learners would feel? So if you did this activity in your classroom, what reactions, what feelings do you think your learners would have? It felt pressured to relax. Yeah, it's different and something that, yeah, you kind of have to get used to a little bit. Yes, Sandra, thank you so much for saying that. They may not understand it, and that's a really awkward, confused, yes, very, very good things to point out, and I will kind of address those as we go. And then lastly, how do you think your learners could use this we kind of mentioned in the classroom a little bit, but also outside the classroom. How could your learners use an activity like this in their everyday lives? Help to focus, to get grounded. Yeah, like any of us. Yeah, great. Handling anger. Perfect. A break from the kids. Yeah, very good. Good. All great responses. So thank you for participating in that with me. I know it is a little bit different and can be a little awkward, especially in the virtual world where like pausing for 30 seconds can be very nerve-wracking. So I appreciate that. And just to sum up, these activities, they do allow learners to focus and leave stress and responsibilities outside of the classroom. They do create an environment and conditions that will support the social emotional learning and culturally responsive teaching activities we're going to look at today. They can be very vital when you're working towards that growth mindset, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. But with adult learners, relevance and purpose are very, very important. So like a lot of people mentioned in the chat, this could be new, confusing, awkward. So really explaining this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and getting them to reflect as well on it would be very important. And it's going to be important with any of these activities, really, because they're going to be new. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this presentation. Okay, so these are the frameworks that these activities are based on and rooted in. These frameworks are culturally responsive teaching and social emotional learning. While most of the activities that we're going to look at today are more directly related to social emotional learning, the Ready for Rigor framework that's presented in culturally responsive teaching consists of 4 quadrants, and these activities really speak to 2 of them, which are building learning partnerships, building a community of learners, and creating a learning environment. Both of these quadrants involve getting to know your learners, and the social emotional learning activities are a strategy for doing that. Most research regarding social emotional learning is in regards to K through 12 learners. However, as we all know, adult learners are bringing so much to the classroom, from their funds of knowledge to their multiple life responsibilities. Social emotional learning allows learners to understand themselves and others better, to communicate about emotions, attitudes, and opinions, and to work towards goal setting, as well as college and career readiness skills. There's actually quite a bit of research with like middle school and high school students and how social emotional learning really helps to prepare them for the next steps in life. And I think some of that research could be applied to our adult learners as well. It is important to mention that just by implementing some of these activities in your classroom does not mean that these frameworks are being fully implemented. The process of immersing your classroom in these frameworks is long and involved, and really it's a journey, not really a destination. But using these activities with your learners is a good starting point. And at the end of this presentation, there are resources for each of these frameworks if you would like to dig deeper and work more on fully implementing these frameworks in your classroom. It's also important to talk about, why are we talking about these activities for adult learners? And these frameworks can really impact the learning outcomes of our adult learners. And I know it may seem overwhelming to focus on several different theoretical frameworks. I've already mentioned mindfulness, social emotional learning, culturally responsive teaching. However, all of these really work together, with one another, and they support each other in accomplishing learner and classroom goals. As I've mentioned already, these activities have been found to reduce anxiety, which in return allows learners to ready and focus their minds for learning and creates a safe learning environment. So today we are going to look at these 3 activities. We have growth mindset prompts, empathy, task cards, and the emotional check-ins. And I'm going to show you these activities, but I'm also going to ask you to participate in them as well. I'm going to use a few different technology tools, and I will try and provide as much guidance and support with that as possible. But if you ever feel you're not able to really use the other technology tools, please feel free to participate in the chat, because that's always an option here. Also, because we are in a virtual environment, I'm going to demonstrate these activities virtually. However, with a few minor adaptations, they should also be successful in the face-to-face classroom. I also want to acknowledge that this may be a new topic of conversation with our learners, and I do understand that there will need to be pre-teaching scaffolds, modeling, and adaptations that will need to be in place in order for these activities to be successful in your classroom. And we are going to touch on that kind of at the end of the presentation. Also, as we move through these activities, please feel free to put questions in the chat box that you might have at any point. I will address them at the end of the presentation altogether. In addition, please feel free to add your ideas, experiences on using these activities with adult learners. So if you think of something that might work really well, please put that in the chat. Or if you've done something similar to this with your learners, definitely share that experience. So we're going to start by looking at the growth mindset prompts and the empathy task cards, but I wanted to mention some strategies for integrating these activities into your classroom. It's really important to note that these activities should not be seen as something extra that needs to be done. When using these activities, it's important to integrate your classroom content into them. This means using target vocabulary, themes, grammar that you're already using in your classroom, just incorporating them into these activities. This will help to create relevance for these activities and will give learners the opportunity to connect these activities with language and situations that they will encounter outside of the classroom. In addition, it's important to integrate these activities into your classroom routine. The more learners see these activities, the more they will come to expect them and feel comfortable with them. So that also goes back to that concern about some of these being awkward or confusing. The more we do them in our classroom, the more comfortable our learners will be with them and the more relevance they will see for them. As we look at some examples, we'll talk more about how these activities can be used in the classroom. However, they are very flexible and adaptable. Some ways that I've highlighted here to integrate these activities into your classroom routine would be using them as a warm-up to activate background knowledge on the topic or the content that you're going to be covering in the class. You can also use these activities as kind of a jumping off point for dialogues, role plays, and other extension activities where learners are not only able to identify their emotions and opinions within a situation, but also able to practice applying that. And some of the examples we're gonna look at, you'll see that you can actually get a lot of really good student-generated content from these activities that you can use in your classroom and in other ways. Okay, so we're gonna dive in. So we're gonna start with the growth mindset prompts. The growth mindset prompts are used to give learners the opportunity to reflect on what they've done in life, the experiences that they have had, and how those can be applied towards working on their current goals. These prompts give learners the opportunity to really consider what their strengths and capabilities are in hopes that these activities will help move learners towards having a growth mindset. If you'd like to learn more or explore more about the growth mindset, I do have resources for that in the resource folder as well. So I have a few different versions of this activity that we're going to look at. First, I do have a Google slide presentation. So I have a Google slide presentation. And so this slide kind of shows you the format of the growth mindset prompt activity. You would typically have a situation. So here we have talk about a time that you were lost. For these examples, I really tried to focus on experiences that most adults have had or probably have experienced that are relevant to their lives and their experiences. So you kind of present that situation and then you have a question that asks them to kind of reflect on how they handled that situation in a positive way. How did you overcome that? How did you fix it? How did you find your way? And then I also like to include an image that is able to scaffold the situation, especially working with English language learners. I think images are really helpful to help them understand, the concept and the situation that you're talking about. Also, it is important to think about the level of your learner. I've included some examples that are, maybe more intermediate and some that are a little bit more advanced. For example, on this slide, the first two questions I tried to keep fairly simple, but with this third question, it's a little bit more of an advanced question. So if you're working with a multi-level class where you need to have content at various levels, you can do that. Or if you just want to kind of level up the content for your advanced learners, you can add in those more challenging questions and content. I did want to show with this one how you could use this in a virtual classroom using the Zoom Annotate feature, or Google Classroom also has an Annotate extension, so you can use Annotation Tools in that format as well. And yes, you will have all of these resources. I have a Google folder I'm going to share, and you can make a copy of all of these, use them or change them and make them your own. So I'm going to go ahead and present this slide. So my suggestion would be kind of starting with the image and talking about the image. What does this green check mark mean? What does the red X mean? And just kind of get them thinking about the image. Then you would present that first question. So what is a mistake that you have made? Mistake can be a difficult vocabulary word, so that may need some pre-teaching or some examples given. You may need to model that a little bit for your learners. And then next, you're going to have a white box that pops up, and if you're using the Zoom Annotate feature, your learners would be able to type their answer directly into this box using their own keyboard. And I would suggest modeling this. So if I was doing this, okay, what is a mistake that you have made? For me, my mistake, I was late to work. So I would type, I was late to work in the box, and then I would ask the learners to follow suit there. And then the next question, what did you learn? Okay, I made a mistake, not a great thing, but how can I move forward better in the future? What did I learn? And so another white box pops up, and again, your learners would type into this box their lesson that was learned. And again, you would go back to your example, I was late to work, what did I learn? To set my alarm clock, right? And you would type that in the box, and so they would understand the connection between the first question and the second question. And what's great about this is you'll have, like I said, student-generated content. You could build dialogues or role plays off of these scenarios that the students have come up with. Use them for different extension activities. Get out of that one. So today we are I'm going to ask you all to participate in one of these, but we're going to use Jamboard for that. So I actually need to put the link in the chat. Give me 1 second. Okay, so that link is in the chat. So if you can just click that link, it will take you to our Jamboard that I have open here.
Haley, can you put it to all panelists and attendees?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
It's okay. It won't let me copy and paste it. Otherwise, I would do it for you.
Okay. 1 second. Okay, now you should have it. You can just, like I said, click on that link. It should open a new browser. Yay, I see people. So I've set it up. I didn't know how many people we'd have today, so I wanted to have a few different options for participation. So if your last name starts with A through G, you will respond to slide 2. If your last name starts with H through M, you're going to respond to slide 3. If your last name starts with N through S, respond to slide 4. And then T through Z will respond to slide 5. In order to rotate or to move through the slides, you're just going to click on the arrow up here. It says next frame, and it'll take you to the different slides. And then you have 3 different options for responding. You can use the sticky note. So with the sticky note, you click the sticky note and you just type your response and you click save. If you could also use an image. So for example, if I'm responding to a time you were lost, maybe I was lost in a big city. So I'm going to search big city and add image. Or you can use the text, which is right here. And again, you just click in there and type. So feel free to use whatever response option you would like. And just let me know if you have any issues in the chat box. And delete that. Oh, someone's moving it. Okay, there we go. And I'll see how things are panning out. Okay, we got one. Good. Yeah, I like the sticky notes because you can color coordinate your responses, which is kind of nice. Perfect. So this is a good example. What is a current problem? I have a very busy schedule. How will you solve it? I'll rest. What advice? Keep a written schedule. Drink a lot of water. Good. So great example. So again, you can see how you would have that student generated content from this, and you could use it to have your learners write their own stories or create their own dialogues or role plays, or just use it to learn some new vocabulary. It's always great to have learners generating that content. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed participating in that one. Again, if you have any questions about that, or if you want to share, some thoughts or ideas, am I supposed to be able to add content to the Jamboard? You should be able to using the text box, the sticky notes, or the image options in Jamboard. If you're on a phone, it may be difficult. That would be the only. Okay, yeah, keep trying. You'll also have access to this afterwards if you want to go in and play around with it a little bit too. So that was the Jamboard example for the growth mindset prompts. And for in class, so if we're talking about face-to-face and not just virtual, you could do a similar, Jamboard, but using the board with sticky notes, or have learners come up to the board and write their responses, or just have them work in small groups to respond to these prompts. You can also use that Google slide deck, of course, in a face-to-face classroom as well. Also, if learners have access to their mobile devices or to like Chromebooks or laptops, Jamboard's great to use in the face-to-face classroom also. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the empathy task cards. So the purpose of these activities is to give learners the opportunity to consider how people feel in different situations and how they would react to them. With this activity and the growth mindset prompts, you should find that people will have an array of responses, which will allow for more opportunities for discussion between learners and will assist learners in viewing situations from different perspectives. So for the empathy task cards, the situation that you're presenting to the learners should be relevant to your classroom and to adult learners. It should include a reflection question on how the person in that situation or any person in that situation might feel, and also a question on how the learner might react to that situation. And depending on the level, you may also want to only have one question, or if these activities are new to learners, you may want to just start with one question, and then as they get more comfortable, add in that second question. It's also a good idea here to try to provide an image to scaffold the situation. So with the empathy task cards, I have a Google slide presentation. It's very similar to what I just showed with the growth mindset prompts. So I'm not going to show that here, but you will have access to it in the resource folder. For these, we're actually going to use Minty Meter as our mode of participating in these activities. So I'm going to go ahead and open my Minty Meter, and I'm going to pull up the instructions here. So for Minty Meter, you could use your mobile device, or you can just go to minty.com in a separate browser on your computer. So you have both options. You can also, with your mobile device, scan the QR code. So I like to use my phone for Minty. It's a little bit easier. Everyone doing okay with that? Let us know if you're having any issues in the chat with that. Thank you, Gina, for putting in minty.com in there and the code. Okay, so hopefully everyone is getting in there. So this is, like I said, very similar to what the Google slide deck for empathy task cards look like. This is actually a Google slide I've just put into Minty Meter. So it's very easy if you want to create a slide deck in Google Slides with these and then put them into Minty Meter and use them that way. It's pretty simple. So I'm presenting a situation. David is new to this city. That's the situation we're going to be talking about. I have an image here that hopefully shows that someone's moving and that they're new here. I have a question that asks the learners to think about how David feels. So how do you think he feels? And then I have a question here that asks how the learner would react. What would they do in this situation? So what can you do to welcome him? So in Minty, the first slide here is going to ask you, oh, I already have some responses, yay. It's going to ask you to think about how David feels. And like I said, really cool thing about these is you should get a good balance of different emotions. So like here we can see some positive emotions, right? But we also see things like overwhelmed, exhausted, anxious. So it's good. It looks like excited and nervous are our top responses. That's also really a really good feature of Minty Meter is the more popular answers will appear larger. So you get a good idea of kind of the more popular responses. Perfect. And one way you could scaffold this for learners is to provide a word bank for this activity. So, you know, if they're not really familiar with this vocabulary, you could provide them with some options, talk about what they mean, and then have them respond with what they think in the situation. Another option here is to have learners talk about why they chose the option that they chose. So, okay, if you chose excited, tell us, you know, why did you choose excited? Have you moved before and was that exciting for you? And, you know, good way to get conversation going. And then the next slide, what can you do to welcome David? So this is going to be, just want to make sure we don't have any questions here. Okay. So this is going to be a different style of Minty. And if you're using it, you're going to have to slide over to the next slide. Hopefully that, okay, got some responses there. So this is a different style of Minty. This is just an open response. So you can kind of just put, you know, whatever you need here. Housewarming gift. Ask how I could help him. Oh, good. Bake lots of things. Meet for coffee. Show him around town. Smile. Yeah, great responses. One thing that's really good about Minty as well is that you'll get all of this in a PDF form. So you can give this to your learners. They can go home and look at it and think about it, use it for vocabulary practice. But also, I think this would be a really good one to build either, you know, they create a story around one of these options, or they do like a dialogue or a role play around the content that they've created here. Yeah, the word cloud is free. Everything I'm showing on Minty, actually anything I'm showing today is free. I haven't paid for any of this. So yeah, okay. So those are the empathy task card. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah. So similarly, this is something you could definitely do in the face-to-face classroom as well. Minty, you can use Minty Meter in the face-to-face classroom if students have access to devices, or you could do, low-tech options as well for that. Before we move on to the emotional check-in, does anyone have any questions or, or any ideas that are kind of popping in your head? How are you feeling about these activities so far? Just want to pause for questions and reflections. If there are any. How do you access Minty to create one? I'm not trying to oversimplify, but if you just Google Minty Meter and you create a free account, and then you just create a presentation, it's very similar to creating like a Google slide presentation or a PowerPoint presentation. There's also a lot of really good videos. Like if you go to YouTube and type in Minty Meter, that can help with that as well. It's nice to have those tools where you can kind of transfer skills from more commonly used things like PowerPoint to these other tools. Okay, so we are going to move on to our last activity type. So we're going to talk a little bit about the emotional check-ins, which we kind of saw this at the beginning of the presentation. That's that activity we did with the sheeps. These types of activities, they create community in the classroom. It's an opportunity for learners to get to know each other and, for you to get to know your learners better as well. They don't have to just be used at the beginning of a class though. You can kind of scatter them throughout if you want to kind of gauge how learners are feeling about different topics or different activities throughout your class. Also, it's great to do this at the end of the class as well to get their reflection on that class period, how their learning progress is coming along. And if you don't have time in class, you can also incorporate these into an exit ticket as well. Most likely it's going to take time for learners to get accustomed to participating in these activities. Some strategies for working towards full participation are to start with making these activities anonymous. I know today it wasn't anonymous because we used the chat, but if you use like an annotate feature or Jamboard, different ways of having students react to these, interact with these activities in a way that is anonymous. And then you can kind of open up sharing to those who feel comfortable, much like at the beginning of this presentation, where I said, if you want to provide an explanation, feel free to do so. You don't have to. Just trying to make them feel more comfortable opening up about their emotions and their feelings. In addition, it is a good idea to work as a class to establish understanding around what images represent what emotions. A lot of these activities are going to utilize emojis to represent emotions. So, it's good as a class to establish this emoji means happy, this one means sad, so on and so forth. And in the resource folder, there is a Google Form activity where you could use that to work with your learners to kind of establish meaning of different emojis if you're going to use those images for these activities. Also, I would recommend starting with just a few simple emotions and kind of work towards incorporating new, more nuanced emotions later once learners seem comfortable with these activities. In one of the resources I provided, it's a different presentation on SEL, and they talk about Mood Meter, which is a really cool tool. It's an app, but you can also just use the image, but it has like a ton of emotions on it, very nuanced emotions, which could be really fun. But I'm thinking about, ESL learners, especially low-level learners or learners who are just starting to communicate their emotions in English, may not be a good starting point for them. And another suggestion is finding less explicit ways for learners to represent how they're feeling. Much like the sheep example, you didn't have to necessarily say, I'm feeling tired or exhausted. You could just pick an image So that might be a little bit less intimidating. And we're going to look at another example of that as well. So to begin with, I'm going to show the Google slide here that I have. And so this is just an example. It's a very explicit emotional check-in. How are you today? And you have the emojis, you have the vocabulary words typed out that go along with them. And then I've also included sentence stems here so that learners know how to respond to this question. And of course, modeling here would be really important. And also, part of that, like making it relevant, making it less confusing, making it less awkward, is that as the instructor, we're also participating in these activities. We're also being vulnerable in these conversations. So, so this is one example. And then I have another example. It's a little less scaffolded. This is where, really understanding as a class what these emojis represent would be important. And then I also included our sheep example from today. And, if you're using Zoom or Google Classroom, you could just present this and have students participate in the chat. Or if you did want to keep it anonymous, you could use the annotate feature as well. Then wanted to show an example of an emotional weather report. This is a bit abstract, which can be difficult with English language learners, but it is also a less explicit way of expressing your emotions, and it's a good way to reinforce vocabulary that's pretty common to an ESL classroom. So if you're, working in like adult basic education or, outside of ESL, you may want to think about what are common topics that you talk about in your classroom that you could kind of use for this type of activity. So basically what you would do is just have learners think, okay, how are you feeling today? And if you could think about what weather represents your feeling, how would you describe that weather? So here I have an example where it's just words. So cloudy, no rain, 58 degrees. To me, this would be kind of like, blah, I'm okay, not great. And then they could also use an image as well, which I have this bright, sunny autumn morning. This is crisp and exciting and lovely. And that would be kind of how I would see that. But of course, this could be different for different people. For example, if you're thinking about like a snowy evening night, I don't like the snow and I don't like being cold. So that's probably not going to be like a positive emotion for me. But for some people, that could be comfortable or warm or cozy. It's just it's an interesting way of getting different perspectives of how people feel and think as well. And then the last one I'm going to show today is the Fist to 5 activity, and this is in Jamboard. And basically, this is a really good one to use to kind of just like check in and gauge how learners are doing. 5 is awesome, great. 1 being not great, pretty bad. And you can do this anonymously, or you can do this where learners are identifying themselves. So if you do want learners to use their names, what you would do before you do this activity is go in and add each of your students' names to these sticky notes so that when they go into the Jamboard, all they have to do is pick up their sticky note and drag it to, the box that they think is most applicable to how they're feeling. Alternatively, you just leave the sticky notes blank and have them pick one up and drag it to wherever they want to go. It's not going to let you know who feels what, but it is going to give you an idea of like a majority of people are feeling good, a majority of people aren't. So it can be a good gauge whether it's anonymous or not. And there are a few other examples of this in the resource folder as well. So these examples are not just limited to what I was showing you today. So some ideas for the face-to-face classroom that I thought about were using emoji stickers. So as learners kind of check in, it's a good way to take attendance too. They pick an emoji sticker that you've provided and they put it next to their name. You could also have make emoji paddles where they kind of just hold up that emoji and how they're feeling for the day. You could use the Google slide deck and have learners talk to each other in pairs or small groups about how they're feeling. again, any way to make this probably at the beginning to make this whole group and anonymous, just to get learners comfortable, I think would be a good idea. For the fist to 5, I think 5 is really good and 1's probably not. But again, you could, you know, do it either way you wanted to in your classroom. Okay. So those are the activities. I feel like that went a lot faster than I was anticipating. That's good. So I did want to provide a little bit of time for you all to kind of reflect and discuss what we've talked about today. I know that was a lot of information, a lot of activities, and I just wanted to give a little time to digest and share your thoughts. So, you know, using the chat box, if you want to make any comments about how you would integrate these into your classroom, if you could provide like your level and your teaching context, just to give a little context to your response, that would be great. But, you know, what do you feel like you would need to pre-teach? What scaffolds would you need, or what materials would you need? Yeah, pre-teaching the apps and tools is always important. I chose tools that I'm really comfortable with, that I know a lot of our programs in Virginia are using. However, you could do these on different platforms. So you don't necessarily have to feel limited to what I have suggested. So aside from having students identify feelings, what else can engage their SEL beyond that? That's a really good question. In the resource folder, there are a few different examples that you can use for SEL. I think really just getting them to think about different perspectives, you know, is important. Engaging with their own emotions, their own feelings, their own opinions, but also those of others. So like having a debate or a discussion about, you know, a hot topic or something like that can help as well. Yeah, I'm going to show you the resource folder on the next slide. How do you follow up with results? Do you have students talk about their read? Yeah, I mean, I would definitely encourage following up with learners about the results. That kind of goes back to the purpose and the reason and the relevance. And I would try to have students talk about why they feel the way they do. I think, you know, going back to this is going to be probably a new topic for them, something that they're not expecting in the classroom potentially. So I would suggest kind of working your way up there. But hopefully this helps to create, you know, the environment in a classroom where you can have those conversations with your learners. I know in the last year, you know, classes have been having little mini town halls at the beginning where students can kind of talk about how they feel. And yeah, so like Jenna said, yeah. Perfect. Need to pre-teach vocabulary, how to use the apps. Yeah, use the chat. Definitely. If you're working with, you know, low digital literacy skills, use the chat, build them up to other skills. I'm trying to see if there's any other questions. I think I got most of them. Yeah, Patricia, I think having them identify how they feel at the end is a great idea. I think it really gives us a good idea of how the class went, what we might need to do differently next time. So yeah, I think, again, like I'm kind of presenting these in certain ways, but I do think they're very adaptable, and I would highly encourage everyone to use them however they think would benefit their class, because every class is different. Using mindfulness before a big assessment, I really like that idea. Okay, so keep those thoughts going. I am going to save the chat so that I can also put our discussion from the chat box into the resource folder, so we have all of those great ideas for you all to look at later. I did just want to kind of sum up with some of the best practices for implementation. I think I've mentioned some of these explicitly or implicitly a little bit throughout the presentation, but you know, focusing on these practices really helps to simplify the efforts for instructors. I actually got a lot of these best practices from a links presentation on SEL, and it is provided in the resource folder as well. So it has different resources and more information. Another good practice anytime you're implementing something new is to work with a group of other instructors in a sort of professional learning community where you can share materials, experiences, modifications. Anytime you're doing something new, it's really helpful to talk through that work. So I would definitely encourage you to, you know, work with other instructors and work together on the implementation of this. So this is my resource slide. I know it looks like I have a lot more resources for culturally responsive teaching. However, this website right here, What is SEL, is CASEL's website, and they do everything SEL basically. So they have informational resources, they have research that backs up these activities. Again, it's from a very K through 12 perspective, but they do have a section on adults, which is more so like teachers engaging in SEL, but it's still really good research, and I think can be really applicable to what we're doing. And then I have a QR code here that will link you to my Google folder as well. And then I can also put, I think I have that link here too. I can put in the chat box. There we go.
So thank you so much, Haley. This has been really wonderful and just a breadth of information. And plus, I think these types of exercises really touch you in the feelings. And I always love that in the classroom, just knowing that you're connecting with your students emotionally, not just what's your learning objective for today. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to our feedback survey in the chat box here. It takes just a couple of moments to do. Ideally, you know, we can't know what benefits the Virtual Training Institute, or we can't grow unless we know, is how I've been saying it. So please provide honest feedback. It's totally anonymous. And that way we can really gauge what sessions we will offer twice a year. Additionally, if you're looking for proof of participation for any of our sessions, you'll find a link to the proof of participation what word am I looking for? Form survey on our website. And you can just do it one time for the entire Virtual Training Institute, and we'll do our best to get the proof back as quickly as possible so that you can submit it to your respective programs. But yes, I agree, Rebecca, great timing for this presentation, really just wonderful information. If you need anything additional, please feel free to contact me directly. Otherwise, all of our content, including the recordings and the archived content and Haley's resources, will be on our website definitely before the end of the month, but I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. But thank you so much for, what if you did one now and need to do others? Karen, you can edit your submission. So go ahead and go back into your submission. It will link to your email address and say, do you want to update this or just submit another one? It's fine. We'll figure that out. But thank you so much, Haley. We definitely appreciate your time today, and I appreciate the participation of all of you who are with us. So we look forward to seeing everyone at future sessions. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes, thank you all so much for participating. Appreciate it.